She stood in front of the president of her own country, and her hands were shaking more than they did on center court at Wimbledon. Sit with that for 1 second, because that single sentence is the whole story you're about to hear. And by the end of this video, you will understand exactly why a 21-year-old girl who had just beaten a 6-time Grand Slam champion in front of the entire world was more nervous walking into a dinner room in Manila than she ever was walking onto the most famous tennis court on the planet. And there's a moment coming up later in this video, a moment where she says something in her own language that made grown adults in that room stop breathing for a second. And I promise you, if you skip ahead, you will miss why that moment matters so much. So stay with me. Before we go there, I need to ask you for something, and I'm not going to pretend this is just a formality. If stories like this one, real stories about people who fight quietly for years before the world ever notices them, mean something to you, then hitting that subscribe button is not just clicking a button for me. It is telling me that these stories deserve to be told. There are creators out there who make videos about noise. I want to make videos about the moments underneath the noise, the ones that actually make you feel something. If that is the kind of channel you want to keep finding in your feed, subscribe right now, because I promise you, the story only gets heavier from here. Let's go back 9 days before that dinner in the palace, because you cannot understand the second room without first standing in the first one. On the 4th of July, 2026, on center court at Wimbledon, a Filipino tennis player ranked 29th in the world walked out to play just her third ever main draw match at that tournament. Standing across the net from her was a defending champion, a 6-time Grand Slam winner, one of the most dominant players of her generation. Nobody outside of her own circle expected what happened next. She won, 2-1. And with that win, she became the first Filipino singles player in the entire Open era to reach the round of 16 at a Grand Slam. Not the first Filipina, the first Filipino, man or woman, ever. Let that number sink in for a second, because numbers like that do not happen by accident. They happen because somebody spent years training in rooms nobody was filming. She would go on to lose that round of 16 match in 3 tough sets, and then she flew home. And here is where the story stops being about tennis and starts being about something much bigger, because what happened when she landed was not a normal welcome. It was a country deciding, in the space of about a week, that this was a moment it refused to let pass quietly. Now here's where it gets interesting, because 2 completely different worlds decided to claim her on the exact same day, and neither one of them planned it that way. Picture the first scene. It is late morning in a busy commercial district in the Philippines. A line of people is wrapped outside a sneaker store. These are not people waiting for a product launch. They are waiting to sit in a room with her, to hear her talk about what pressure actually feels like from the inside, about the version of herself that used to dream about exactly this life before she was living it. Someone in that line whispers to a friend, "I am so nervous," just to meet her. Keep that sentence in your head, because it is about to come back around in a way you won't expect. Picture the second scene. Same day, evening this time. The location shifts entirely. Now we are inside the ceremonial hall of the Malacanang Palace, the official residence of the President of the Philippines. Family members are seated at the table. The President himself is at the head of it. And the same 21-year-old who had spent her morning being adored by strangers in a sneaker store is now walking into a room to be formally honored by the head of state of her entire nation. On the same day, her ranking sheet was published, showing her at a new career high. Number 28 in the world. 2 rooms, 1 single Monday. And underneath both of them, one nervous young woman trying to hold the weight of an entire country's hope in her hands. Here's the part that I think most people watching the headlines completely missed. The President did not stand up and praise her forehand. He did not talk about her serve or her ranking or the scoreline against the defending champion. He praised something else entirely, something quieter. He told her, in front of everyone in that room, that she had brought pride to the Philippines not only because of her success, but because of the grace with which she carried that success. Sit with that phrase for a second. Grace with which you carry that success. That is not a compliment for a tennis player. That is a compliment for a symbol. And the moment a president chooses to praise how you carry something instead of what you won, that is the exact moment a person stops being just an athlete and becomes something the whole country now looks toward. And this is where the tension of the entire story lives, because a symbol is a heavier thing to carry than a ranking number will ever be. Now here comes the part that stopped the room. When it was her turn to speak, she did something that almost no elite athlete ever does in public. She admitted out loud, in front of the most powerful person in her country, that she does not usually get nervous speaking in public. But that night, she genuinely was. Think about the size of that admission for a second. 9 days earlier, this same young woman had walked onto the biggest tennis stage in the world and beaten a legend without a visible flinch. And now she was telling her president that a dinner in Manila carried more weight for her than center court ever did. But it's what she said next that turned this from a news story into a memory an entire country will hold on to. She said that hearing those words from her president made her feel truly seen, that all the hours of work that never make it onto a television screen finally felt seen, validated, and appreciated. Think about what that really means. Every single professional athlete on earth has thousands of those invisible hours. The early mornings, the physio tables, the long flights, the losses nobody live streams. Almost none of them ever get the chance to say out loud in the country that raised them that those hours actually cost something. On that Monday, she did. And then, just when you think the moment has peaked, she does something even more powerful. She switches into Tagalog, the language of her own home, and tells the room that this victory belongs to everyone, not just to her. She says she carries immense pride in being Filipino, that she carries a flag wherever she goes, and that she intends to keep representing her country in the best way she possibly can. That single shift in language is the moment the whole day stopped being a news event and became a piece of national memory. But here is the twist that most people watching from the outside never stop to think about. This entire wave, the sneaker store event, the palace dinner, the presidential citation, none of it happened simply because Filipino media decided she was special. It happened because the biggest tennis outlets in the entire world, the ones with no connection to the Philippines whatsoever, had already called it first. Major international sports outlets ran headlines calling her a shock, a statement, a moment where she exploded into the sport's wider consciousness. When outlets like that make the same call on the same weekend, governments notice. The palace dinner was not manufactured. It was a ratification of a story the entire tennis world had already agreed was true. And here is a detail that I think deserves its own moment of silence. At the start of 2025, this same young woman was ranked somewhere around 140th in the entire world. By the summer of 2026, she was inside the top 30. That climb did not happen through one lucky tournament. It happened one point, one flight, one physio session at a time, in rooms with no cameras, on days nobody was watching, long before any president ever said her name out loud. Now here's the part of the story the ceremony can never fully cover. It's the part one think matters most. The match everyone in that palace was celebrating, the win over the defending champion, was not even a tournament win. She still lost in the very next round. The palace dinner was never about a trophy. It was about a threshold, a line she had crossed that the entire country needed to acknowledge before she crossed the next one. And in her own words that night, she made it clear that this recognition was not a finish line, that she already had her sights set on bigger milestones ahead. Because here is the part that should genuinely give you chills. 12 days. 12 days after standing in that ceremonial hall being honored by a president, she is scheduled to be back on a hard court, competing in a major tournament in Washington against some of the most